Now, appropriate to mention at this time of year that fitting in at school is hard enough, but imagine growing up above a Chinese takeaway where your parents don't speak a word of English.
Well, the author Sue Cheung's new book is the story of a difficult childhood and an insight into life on the other side of the counter, because Sue worked in that Chinese takeaway, didn't you, growing up?
I did, yes.
And this has been the inspiration for the book, but I think it says it's an almost true story, so...
It is an almost true story, but I would say it's about 80% true, and the bits that are kind of like made up are really the bits that kind of weave all the anecdotes together to make it into a narrative, you know. So yeah, this book, Chinglish, is about my life growing up in a Chinese takeaway in Coventry in the 80s. And it's kind of all about like the culture clashes that happen and all about trying to fit in. And, you know, when you're a teenager, that's all you want to do is try and fit in and be like everybody else. And I wanted to be like the, you know, the Western kids and look like Madonna, dye my hair and all that kind of thing. But it wasn't going to happen because, well, first of all, I totally looked different. And then secondly, I lived above the shop in a Chinese takeaway.
And did you find that difficult with your friends at school and people?
Well, yes, because first of all, there was no living room, so we couldn't bring friends back. You basically, like, if you were going to bring anyone back, it's just a takeaway kitchen with, you know, there's a chair and table in there, sit there, watch my parents, like, cook in the kitchen with the woks and everything. It just wasn't very conventional, and so I actually didn't bring any friends back till I was about 14, 15, and even then it was a friend that I knew had the stamina to actually put up with my very embarrassing parents.
And Jo Kwan is the sort of star of your book. How closely does her life resemble yours? Oh,
completely the same, absolutely the same. And the way that I actually wrote the book in a diary format is a little bit sort of a nod to Adrian Mole. Because I kind of related to him back in the 80s. He was me. He was a bit downtrodden. He was, you know, an outcast. And I totally related to that, and so that's a little bit one of the reasons why it's a diary format. And also I have to say that the book overall is a very funny story. Yes, because that's the way I coped with the awfulness back then, is just by glossing over with humour.
Because you went through some really tough grown-up stuff early. Tell us about your teenage years.
Yeah, so the issues tackled in the book involve things like bullying, racism. You know, it touches on domestic violence as well. The general kind of like teenage angst, first loves, and all that kind of thing. But it isn't all doom and gloom, this book. It's very, very funny. I just thought, you know, and it's illustrated by me as well, so there's some funny doodles in there.
But you actually, one of the things you talk about is you talk about having a baby as a, what age were you? Were you
so
17, 19?
Yeah, I was 19. Yeah. So what happened was the Chinglish actually spans 3 years, from 13 to kind of like 16, and then I go to London. I don't want to really spoil the ending to that, but I end up going to London with the grand ideas of becoming an artist, but I end up pregnant and living in a squat when I was 19, and that's kind of like a result of coming from a bit of a dysfunctional family and, you know, a takeaway environment with parents that don't really kind of talk to you and teach you, you know, how to kind of stand on your own 2 feet in the big wide world. So off I trot and, you know, get it all wrong, and surprise, I'm up the duff.
I mean, your parents obviously were busy running the business. I mean, but you were key to that. As the only one who could speak English, you were often called upon to be the one to ring the police, I understand.
Yeah, that's right. So, yes, there were massive communication problems. My mum hardly speaks English. My dad speaks English, but just doesn't really like speaking. And then me and my brothers and sisters can't hardly speak any Chinese. And it's really weird because most British Chinese people speak Cantonese, but for some reason, my parents chose to speak Hakka at home, which is a rarely spoken dialect. So not only did we hardly know any Chinese, the only Chinese we knew was Hakka. So when friends and family used to visit, they'd say to my mum, "Oh, your children's Chinese is terrible," and she'd go, "Yeah, they're useless, aren't they?"
Oh my goodness.
And we'd be like, "Well, that's not our fault."
So as you've got older, do you feel more positive about your heritage? You know, very often people, you know, as a teenager, you just want to fit in.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was an only recent thing, though, because my agent approached me to write this book, and I said no way at first, because I really wanted to just sweep it all under the... I spent my whole adult life sweeping my past under the carpet. And I really didn't want to write this book because it was digging it all back up again. So yeah, what was the, sorry, I can't remember.
But
You're more resolved to your
Oh,
heritage
yeah, absolutely.
now.
I mean, some of the research that I was doing, I mean, I thought at the time when I was a teenager that we were the only kids living above the shop in a Chinese takeaway at the time. But that wasn't the case. I mean,
as ever with those experiences, you're never alone, are you?
That's right. And yeah.
Sue, thank you very much indeed for coming to talk to us. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Sue Cheung's book is called Chinglish.